Well, hello everyone and welcome. So this is our latest workshop in the Knowledge Network on Climate Assemblies. My name is Mark Beanland and I am one of the conveners of the Knowledge Network. So I'm sitting on a very cold and very windy day in Copenhagen, which is why I'm wearing a big sweater, but I'm very much looking forward to today's workshop. So as you all probably know, the Knowledge Network makes an effort to try to compile what good practice means when it comes to climate assemblies. And we're quite used to talking about this as though the context around the assembly is stable and the challenges are minimized to how to organize the process itself. But the truth is that sometimes processes are organized in environments where there are also quite a bit of external challenges to deal with. And this has implications for the practice. So today we decided to co-host a workshop with our very good member, Éva Bördös, who is from Hungary and is the head of the organization Damir. So in a moment, she will take over and start to introduce what we'll be doing today. But let me first say that it's very interesting for us to, having worked these past years on trying to figure out what good practice means, it's quite interesting to see what happens when suddenly some of the things that we take for granted aren't in place. So for example, if the political system is unstable, or if there are very high levels of conflict among the people who are participating in an assembly. Now, what we really care about is making sure that we have legitimate processes that are independent and are safe for everyone who takes part in them. Now, the question is whether some of the things we take for granted when organizing assemblies maybe doesn't hold true when assemblies are held in very challenging environments. So what we'll do today is we'll first be talking a little bit about what we mean by challenging environments. And then we have three cases that we're going to go through. So we'll have speakers from three different places. They're from three different countries. They have three different types of roles and engagement within their assemblies. And the challenges that each of these assemblies have faced are also very different. So we will be traveling a bit today through a few different scenarios. And my invitation to everyone while listening to the call, of course, is to try to refer and relate this to your own practice. So what does it mean to the way we organize assemblies when certain conditions are there? Now, I'll also recommend that you write your questions in the chat if you have any. And remember that we're recording this, so if you don't like to be seen, simply turn off your camera. But having said that, please do turn on your camera, because it's way more fun to speak to someone that you can actually see. So having said all of this, the workshop will start by us going through a list of speakers, and then we will do breakout rooms at the end after a break. The breakout rooms, as you know if you've joined one of our workshops before, is really about you guys and about your experiences and getting the most out of our collective intelligence as a community. But to take us through introducing our speakers and giving context to what we mean by challenging environments, let me invite onto the stage our co-host today, Éva. So Éva, I've already tried to introduce you. I failed, I think, a little bit on the last name, so maybe you can help us there. But feel free to take the floor, introduce us to your thoughts about what challenging environments are. And yeah, take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Mark, for the great introduction. So again, my name is Éva Bördös, and currently I'm the director of Damir, Hungary, an independent NGO that focuses mostly on cross-sectoral dialogue and citizen assemblies in particular. And it's really, really great to be with you here tonight and welcome everybody who joined us. And thank you to Knoca for actually initiating this webinar, and also to my fellow panelists and speakers who has agreed to join us, and who will actually elaborate on everything I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes, just to introduce the topic, or just to raise some ideas and ask some questions. So I'll have a couple of slides actually to share. So I'm going to try to share my screen right now. Yes. Let me know, please, if everything is okay and going fine. Brilliant. So what are we talking about when we talk about challenging environment when it comes to deliberation and deliberative processes? So we all know from practice and from experiences in Western Europe and other developed countries that citizen assemblies and representative deliberative processes thrive when there is trust in society and where there is a high level of active citizenship. Well, we all know that this is not necessarily the case in Central and Eastern Europe for various reasons that we will discuss. So in Hungary, if you take a look at these numbers, for example, according to the Eurostat data from 2015, we see that only like 4% of Hungarians said that they would consider themselves as active citizens compared to the EU average, which is like almost 13%, or in Sweden, where almost 1/3 of the citizens are thinking about themselves as active citizenship. So why is that? Of course, in this region, in Central and Eastern Europe, we have no solid track record in cross-sectoral dialogue, right? We have quite weak trade unions, and there's an elitist approach when it comes to policy making. This is, of course, a legacy of decades-long Soviet influence. We here in this region, we are not really used to openly expressing our opinions, and many still consider public affairs to be something better to stay out of, because you don't want to say anything that may displease the authorities and something that can be serious consequences. And also what we used to say back in the communist time, that even the walls here had ears. So you never knew actually who was who or who would tell what you had said to them. So people learned to be silent and not to talk and to converse with each other. And this habit is not easy to break. So there's a very, very high level of mistrust and distrust, not only towards political institutions, but also towards each other. So this is definitely one factor that is that impacts on deliberative processes and not easy to deal with. Our colleague Agnieszka Pedzich from the Field of Dialogue Foundation in Poland will tell us how this can be tackled and what practices they use to handle this phenomenon. And also Damir Kapidzic from the University of Sarajevo, whose context is even more challenging, I would say, as a result of the post-conflict environment. So there's this low level of trust in society, and also the high political polarization. We exist and live in opinion bubbles, even more so than citizens in Western Europe. You might have seen the most recent Eurobarometer data that was published recently. And in that data set, we also see that outside Hungary and Poland, there is no member state where, less than 1/3 of the people consider state news agencies to be a credible source of information. Instead, what we use to get our information from is social media. So in Hungary, for example, 83% of citizens use Facebook on a weekly basis, as opposed to the EU average, which is much lower. So we live in these bubbles that we create ourselves, and social media creates for us, and it is very, very difficult to get out of these bubbles. When it comes to the political environment, this situation gets even worse when there are politicians or political powers who try to attack these processes and who try to discredit the deliberative process, and who, for example, call advocates for citizen assemblies as foreign agents, something that happened to us a year ago, 1.5 years ago, when we organized the citizen assembly in the city of Ért, and Tetlak, deputy mayor of Ért, is also here with us, and he will tell us in detail what it was like for the city to have the citizen assembly, and how the city leadership tackled the situations. So, and there's also maybe a risk that that may happen in the future, or not. We'll see. What if politicians will try to co-opt or hijack these processes? Probably we are not going to discuss this in detail as part of, in this webinar, but this is maybe something that also we keep an eye on. Okay, I'm trying to, So, so is there still a chance for deliberative mini-publics, we would ask? And at DemNet, we conducted a national level representative survey recently. The results are not published yet, but please sign up for our newsletters, because or check our website, because next week or week after there will be a detailed report on this. So actually the situation is not good, but not entirely hopeless. So what we see in this, what we saw in this this exercise, is that that 60% of Hungarian citizens actually they don't believe that citizen assemblies are feasible in Hungary, because they say that politicians are not interested in people's opinion, or the population does not know enough about citizen assemblies, and also they don't, again, trust their fellow citizens, and they just simply don't believe that citizens who are invited would actually show up and take part in such processes. But the good news is that people would still participate in these processes if they, were offered and they were invited. So more than half of them said so, at least, which is in itself a good sign, I think. We just need to, tackle the previous challenges that that I was just mentioning. And also the successful citizen assemblies in Central and Eastern Europe, in Poland and Bosnia and Herzegovina and Hungary, show that it is possible to have high quality citizen assemblies and other deliberative processes. But the question is still, how do we ensure the integrity and the legitimacy of these processes in a challenging environment? And I think that our experience is that we really need to emphasize elements of citizen assemblies that may not be seen as important elsewhere, in a more stable environment and more, a different environment. And these elements or angles are the non-partisan approach, or the independent execution of these processes, because this is how we ensure that people will start trusting the system and the methodology and the concept. And we really need to be as transparent as possible. We really need to openly communicate the challenges and every single steps of the process. So even before, throughout, and after the process. And of course, we need to organize high quality processes that are in line with international standards. And you also have to know that practice makes perfect. So these changing mindsets does not happen overnight. So we have to keep doing what we do and organize as many high quality processes as possible. So as said, in Hungary, we have so far organized a couple of local level citizen assemblies. The first one we organized was in Budapest in 2020. The second one took place in the fourth largest city, Miskolc, in 2021. And the most recent citizen assembly took place in Érd, June last year. And that was the first process where we experienced that no matter how badly we wanted this process to be, cross-party process and really try to cooperate with everyone, that unfortunately, that initiative unfortunately failed. So what happened was that the local opposition started to attack us and try to discredit the process, saying that citizen assemblies are not democratic at all, and that we are the agents of George Soros, and that we try to undermine the, not even sure what. And I clearly remember, quite vividly, how I felt when I first learned about these accusations. But at this point, I think I would like to ask the Deputy Mayor of Érd, Mr. Tetlak, to walk us through the process and tell us why Érd decided to host the citizen assembly, what it was like to organize it, and what kind of results the process delivered. Would you do it again? And everything that you think that is relevant to share with us today. So thank you very much, and Urs, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It was a very nice introduction, and partly you already told the story of our Citizens Assembly in Érd. As Éva mentioned, I'm the deputy mayor of my hometown. This is my first mandate, so this is the first term of the recent majority of the city council. And I would like to thank for the opportunity to talk about my hometown and about this event what we organized together with Damnet last year. I took a few notes because it happened 1.5 years ago, so I don't exactly remember every single detail, but I'll try to be as precise as possible. Well, the whole process was really exciting. So I have to admit that at first I was a little bit skeptical, but only because of the selection process of this citizens assembly. To be honest, we didn't want to meet the same people for the I don't know, thousandth time. So we didn't want to hear the same opinions, the same points of view. And we didn't want to discuss the same matters for I don't know how many times again. So that's why it was really interesting. So how we could be able to recruit and select new people, new local residents who would share with us new ideas, new points of view, and probably also new problems what we never thought of. And on the other hand, it was the whole idea was love at first sight from my point of view, because I'm really into deliberation. And after 13 years of local rule of the Fidesz party, so the ruling state party, we call it the state party. So I unfortunately, I remember the 80s very well. I'm old enough to remember the 80s, and the Fidesz party is really similar to that time socialist rulers. So in Hungary, the situation isn't challenging. It is getting worse and worse, to be honest. And the local governments and some certain cities are the last stands, and and also the front end, still the front end of public happenings. I have to admit that the government tried to create a kind of parallel universe, a kind of parallel reality beside the local governments. Its name is the government's office, and these are offices related to the government. and have county or district-wide competencies. And today, a lot of authorities are shared between the local governments and the government's offices. So it's not easy at all to regain and maintain our independency as local communities. So back to the Citizens' Assembly. So the selection process was a huge success because out of 50 members, I knew only 2, and it was great because first I thought that at least half of the team will have a personal connection with any of the city managers, but they were really new people and new faces. And from the very first moment of the whole process, we tried to be as transparent as possible. We wanted to create a brand new atmosphere with the Citizens' Assembly because in the beginning of our mandate, so in 2019, we promised the city that we will open the gates of the town hall. At the same time, literally, so in practice and also figuratively, I'm sitting right now in my office, and I have a direct door to the floor, so nobody is standing in front of my office. Anybody can enter. I hope that no one will disturb in the coming moments. But the gates are really open, and the Citizens' Assembly seems to be a nice tool and a very useful tool to start a kind of joint thinking with the local residents. So back to the process. There were 2 weekends of the assembly itself. During the first weekend, the mayor and the 2 deputy mayors, we were visiting one of the twin cities in Czechia, so we didn't participate at all. But that was the idea behind the whole process, that we wanted to get rid of the political influence totally, and we wanted to be and we wanted to have an assembly and an event for the people, for the locals, for the local residents, and not for the political actors. As Éva mentioned, and she was totally right, that the local opposition, I have to explain it a little bit. So in Erd, we live in an inverse situation because the local opposition is the Fidesz party, so the state party. Because in 2019, we won the local elections, and we have a majority. We have a very wide coalition in Erd, in our city, and we are sitting in a joint fraction in the town's council, and the majority belongs to us. So there are 10 members of our fraction, and there are 6 members of Fidesz party, and there are 2 more independent councillors in the town council. So, but as we mentioned, we wanted to involve as many people as possible, and we didn't want to exclude the voters and the members of the local opposition. But unfortunately, we failed, although it was a very proactive process, because from time to time, so every single day, we tried to figure out what kind of objection we will face the next day. And we had an approx 80 or 90% hit rate, so we could figure out what kind of objections they will have, and what kind of messages they will share in the local media, and also on the surfaces of the social media as well. In my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, authoritarian actors and authoritarian leaders cannot cope with transparency at all, and it's also true in local level as well. Partly because of the political background, and partly because of how to say it, personal qualities, and I wouldn't like to offend anyone. So during the process, we tried to involve them, because we organized a kind of a discussional forum before the Citizens Assembly, and exclusively the members of our fraction occurred and showed up during that session or during that meeting. We wanted to have personal opportunities to talk and discuss the features of the event. They didn't show any interest at all, but during the whole process, they shared exclusively negative news, negative messages about the Citizens Assembly. So the first weekend was a kind of knowledge acquisition, and with the help of the experts and with the help of the facilitators, the organizers created a kind of joint educational process with the participants, and they gathered as many information about architecture, traffic, public transport, local issues as possible. As I mentioned, we didn't want to get involved too deeply in the process, so we've secured the technical background. Some of the clerks of the town hall were involved in the process. They had some lectures as well, but it was totally independent from the town hall and from the city management. And in the end of during the first session, the participants also had the opportunity to meet some local councillors, and they had some discussions with some of the council members, and they had the opportunity to discuss the topics of the assembly. What I forgot to mention. So actually, so the topic of the Citizens Assembly was the future of our city, because our city is a kind of, it's a typical suburban city right beside Budapest, so right beside the capital. We face a lot of challenges. We share the city borders with 7 other settlements, and also with the capital as well. We share some streets with 3 of our neighbors. So one part of the city belongs to Air, the other one, the street. So one part of the street belongs to Air, then the other one belongs to the neighboring settlements. So it's a typical suburban area. We call it a sleeping settlement, because most of the local residents take their car early in the morning. They go to work to Budapest, and then they come back late afternoon or early in the evening. They sleep here, but they don't live here in the city. And we would like to change this whole situation. And that was the purpose. That was the main goal of the assembly, to find out and to find ways and ways out for our beloved city. And so during the second session, the second weekend, we were home. So the mayor and the deputy mayors, we were also here. We spent a few hours together with the participants. It was a kind of consultation or a kind of conference with the facilitators and with the participants. There was a Q&A with the mayor and with me, and what else? I don't remember exactly.
Apologies, Deputy Mayor. We just have 2 more minutes, unfortunately. Because we need to move on. Sorry.
Okay, about the outcome and the follow-ups. So at the end of the second weekend, we received a list of proposals, a package of proposals from the participants, and it included 7 elements. Like roads, bicycle infrastructure, creating environment-friendly jobs in the city, rainwater management, and so on and so on. And since then, so during the last year, the last 20 months or I don't know, 80 months, we included, or at least try to include, every single proposal in the city strategies. Some of the proposals are already in the realization process, like the parking system in the city center. And all in all, the whole assembly was a huge success. And we created a lot of follow-up events, a lot of follow-up opportunities. We created together with Damnet a very nice video about hosting with a very popular TV host from Hungary, and we shared it as wide as possible. We had a follow-up meeting, and we will have another follow-up meeting in December, in a few days. And next year, we would like to carry on the process. We would like to invite different residents and discuss with them at least 2 more topics of the original proposals. And right now, it's an ongoing study. Sociology students from Budapest are working with certain neighborhoods of Érd, and this study is based on. And I think that my time is up.
Thank you so much.
So thank you for your attention. I tried to share with you as many information as possible.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. We will discuss the Érd case study in detail in one of the breakout rooms after Agnieszka and Damir's intervention. Now we need to move on, and we are gonna hear some very interesting stories from Agnieszka Pedzich, who will guide us through the Polish examples in processes where she was involved as a facilitator. So Agnieszka, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. We as a foundation, Creative Dialogue Foundation, we were organizers of three climate-related assemblies in Poland, in Krakow, in Warsaw, and just recently, together with the Shipyard Foundation in Rzeszów. We've just finished on Saturday, so it's very fresh experience. And actually, all of them were in very polarized and challenging environments. So I totally agree with everything you mentioned at the beginning, Eva, about this climate we have in Central Europe. Maybe it's not the case of this accusations strictly against the methodology, but still we haven't, we as a foundation, we haven't experienced that. But yes, the last one, the last climate assembly that we were doing in Rzeszów was just after the elections, elections that were really, yeah, they were very polarized from both sides, and the campaign, the election campaign was very, very tough and intensive and divisive. And climate as such is a very polarizing and triggering topic in Poland, because it's being used by the conservative politicians as in anti-European Union narratives. They are trying to, they are seeking for an enemy and trying to defend Polish tradition, Polish values, and the climate and European climate policy is a kind of, it's fueling the anti-democratic moods and vibes. So we were really anxious about this process when we were even starting it. And the first meeting was just after a week. The first meeting was a week after the elections. The topic, climate in general, is triggering, and transport, sustainable transport, is always emotional, because there is always car lobbyists versus bicycle riders, and people are afraid that someone will forbid them from entering the city. Could be there. Well, I see a question on the chat whether elections are a problem as such. I wouldn't say it's elections, but it was the the climate just before, I mean, the discussion and the narratives being used just before the election. And we knew from research that the climate, discussing about the climate is strongly connected with the European Union, which is from the conservative parties, by the conservative parties used as a kind of threat to our independence. So in this way, it was fueling anti-European Union narratives. So what was helpful for us, and well, that's something I would like to maybe share at this moment, is definitely the setup and the communication, as you mentioned at the beginning, Eva, that from the very beginning, from the first meeting, and we were repeating that on and on, that the diversity of this group is the value. So it's like there was no use in using the weapon of being different from others and looking for some enemies. And we were saying that that's why we have this group so diverse. That's why we put so much attention to the randomization of these participants. That we did care about different opinions. We were encouraging them to have different opinions. And at the beginning, they were trying us, and they were checking if it really works, if they will say something controversial, if someone will stop them from saying that. But if that didn't happen, and if all of these ideas, even if they were really, we were encouraging discussion and exchanging the opinions, exchanging the perspectives. That's what you said, getting out of the bubbles. That was really important. And I think as soon as they felt that this space is really safe for that, and that we're listening to them, and that other people are interested in their perspectives, in everyone's perspective, it's really started to work, and trust appeared, so to say. So the next thing would be goal concentration on the goal, and they were that was the other thing we're doing. So the program was so intensive, there were lots of activities, and we're concentrated on the goal. So that even themselves, they were guarding that we are not talking off topic too much, and they started to believe it's really serious, that they were kind of chosen for this job to decide on the city future, and they started to feel it's kind of responsibility for that. And the president gave his promise. He came to meet them, and he declared that everything that they will agree to, like 80% of the city assembly, he will implement this decision. So they started to believe it's for real, and start trusted the process. So I think that they get concentrated on the goal, on finding the right solution, on exchanging the opinions between them. What we also did, we wanted to have evidence that was really relevant for them. So not only the cases, very inspirational one, from Western Europe, like Denmark, Netherlands, Switzerland, etc., but really Polish cities that really did it, that it worked somewhere, and they could relate to it, and they could see that it is really possible in their city as well. So I think it really worked for living beside all those things that were not relevant for the discussion about the climate neutrality, like about political opinions on the end of life or beginning of life or wherever, which is really divisive in our society on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it's electoral campaign. They could park here, they could park it somewhere else, and they just concentrated on discussing, that during the winter last year, there was so much snow on the pavement that we couldn't walk through it. And everyone remembered that, and they could really talk about it, how to make the city more friendly to pedestrians, to bicycle riders, and people who use public transportation, how to make it really efficient, and how to optimize it. And it wasn't, I mean, they were looking for solutions that would be good for them as a community and not against someone. Yeah, so that was really good to accompany them in this when we were facilitating the discussions, because it happens just in between them. We didn't have to intervene that much, so that they were listening to their own challenges that they have. So I think that also builds the trust and the transparency, as also you mentioned that, Eva, in your introduction, that the transparency at each stage, because there were, I mean, they were very creative, and the second weekend we ended up with like over 200 recommendations on the table, and that was much too much for this process. Some of them were very similar because they were working in different groups. So there was a process for us to manage somehow to make the list shorter. And what we did, and I also think that was a very good idea, we haven't evaluated it yet, but we felt that it worked, that we invited volunteers from the group to join us for the editing team, so that everyone who was interested in, and they could see how we are working with these recommendations, with all these proposals, searching for possibilities to merge some of them and to include, you know, the same idea that was mentioned in different proposals for recommendations into one, so that to be really consistent with the intention of everyone in all authors, not that it wasn't about our whether we like it or not, but whether it was according to the intention of the panelists, of the participants. So 6 people joined us, and that was really good because they really learned those recommendations, and then they could share it with other participants at the tables on the last day. Yeah, and it brought up also this transparency and trust in the process. I think that was very important. And on the other hand, the trust is also needed on the other side of this process. I mean, with the city officials. So that was the hardest part, I'd say, because for politicians, this polarization is sometimes very useful. When we are group, when we have like a common enemy, and we say that we are doing that, and the others, they do not do that. So it's like this opposition is very, that's the political capital, and we are just before local elections next year in April. So everyone is building up their political power, and but still. And they were kind of slightly scared, even when they saw so many recommendations and so many ideas that they have promised to implement. And
thank you, Agnieszka.
All right.
That idea of maintaining political polarization, being good to certain political powers, is an idea that is actually worth discussing in the breakout room.
All right, perfect. Yeah, okay, sure.
Too. And now we're all moving to Bosnia. And I'm giving the floor to Damir Kapidzic, who is actually not in Bosnia today, but sitting at the Harvard's premises in Boston and doing his fellowship there. And Damir will talk about the Bosnian examples and assemblies that he advised a lot in the past couple of years, and why Bosnia and those assemblies were very special. So Damir, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. So when it comes to Bosnia, the context under which deliberation happens is slightly different and possibly slightly more difficult in some ways than what we have discussed so far. It is essentially about deliberating after conflict, where you have had war as a background to polarizing the population and sort of lowering trust among people who should be talking to each other. So the context which we're speaking is the aftermath of a 3.5-year war in the 1990s, where you've seen a lot of destruction, displacement, destruction of cultural goods as well, and essentially also genocide in parts of the country. And this has had an impact on the society, even today, 25 years after, more than 25 years after, where people don't trust the other group. They sometimes have fear of actually going to where they are a minority, and they don't want to live in every place. Now, the war also ended up with Bosnia being what we call a consociational democracy, where you need an elite consensus, a consensus of the ruling political leaders to make decisions. And in one particular city in Bosnia, in Mostar, this resulted in political gridlock. So from 2008 until 2020, for 12 years, the city did not have elections because there was no ability to come together around a consensus from the two main political parties representing two main ethnic groups who were at war with each other in the 1990s. What this resulted in is a huge backlog of a lot of different policies that were not addressed, and a large part of those related to the city environment, trash collection, and in a sense also public spaces and climate. So how do we get to a citizens' assembly with all of this as a background? In 2020, a process was initiated through the Council of Europe to try to include citizens in decision-making in this context. And the idea was that if politics is not there to make these decisions in such a challenging environment, maybe citizens could provide an alternative view, a different view. And there was a lot of hesitation when this was initiated and started. Like, are citizens actually able to do this? It was the first assembly ever held, or would be the first assembly ever held in Bosnia. It's one of the first assemblies that would be held in a post-conflict environment as well. So here you have a lot of firsts coming up. And how do you actually design such a process where you have low levels of trust and potentially you would bring together people who were fighting with each other just 30 years after with a lot of personal experience and baggage? Now, the process in its design included various what we call fail-safes, or ways to ensure that you would probably not end up with problems. You were never sure about this, by the way. There was always this fear that something might happen. But starting from the sortition process, the recruitment, you would sort of figure out how to include both the ethnic groups. That was one of our major stratification criteria, to also include every major ethnic group, but the minorities as well, to participant registration, to try to explain this as a non-political process in which citizens can contribute with their recommendations. With the writing of the letters, that you would have a very neutral language, not necessarily that you could right away see that it is either geared towards a Croat group or towards a Bosniak or a Serb group, but to be as neutral as possible. And then in the end, to try to bring together the group that, first of all, would be most representative of the city as such, but then also of sort of two groups that were in conflict with each other. The second step is when you do bring them together, like how would they interact? And I mean, the city of Mostar, it's not a big city. It's 100,000 people, where several of them do know each other. But then again, they also are in a broader and a bigger group of, we had 48 citizens together in the room, in a bigger group where there's many new people, new faces around. And while some initially did a lot of the talking through sort of conversation, you could see that a lot of them actually warmed up to this idea that they, as a citizens, share the same problems. What I would first describe the first session, this icebreaker and opening session before we started with the learning process, was a reflection of, or sort of reflection session where people shared their problems and they identified that others from the other group also share the same problems. So in the beginning, I always like to point out the story of one of the participants who was extremely skeptical. He came to the assembly just to figure out how such a process does not work, how it could not produce any outputs, and saying that I'm here, but I'm very sort of, I'm open-minded to listen what you have to say, but essentially I'm here to figure out the flaws and how this actually does not translate into policy. And by the end of the assembly, which lasted for over 4 weekends, over 6 days, he was actually one of the more vocal supporters of the whole thing, having pictures together with the mayor, who is, by the way, from a different ethnic group than he is. They're sort of similar in age, and supporting the mayor now from this other group, saying that he's the right man to implement everything that we said, and we actually can make a difference as citizens. Now, this sort of personal transformation of this one participant is also something that you could see reflected in politics as such, where at the beginning of the assembly, politicians who were supportive were very cautiously supportive of everything that was going on. They were not sure where this was heading and in which direction the citizens might take their views. By the end of the assembly, they were pretty much on board, what we say. They were what we could identify as champions of such a deliberative process. So you ended up with an assembly that we like to highlight as one of the best case scenarios that you could use in a most difficult environment. And the recommendations coming out of the assembly, there were 32 that came out, grouped into 5 areas, and 3 of those areas are climate related. All of them were adopted by the city council 3 months after the assembly ended, which basically meant that they adopted everything the citizens told them to do. And implementation, I mean, it's still ongoing, but through sort of a last overview that was held in July this year, 1/3 of the recommendations are adopted, 1/3 are underway, and another 1/3 still have to be adopted. So in a sense, when you look at such an environment where a citizen assembly would probably not be considered the best solution, sometimes it actually is. This is not to say that it works in every context, and other assemblies that I have held or designed in Bosnia did not produce the same outcomes. One that was held on a different set of issues, more related to electoral reform, that one actually was ignored by politicians. So while the citizens, when we brought them together, still could come to an agreement about possible solutions, you did end up with politics deciding to ignore those recommendations and focus on something entirely different instead. Meaning, challenging environments can actually benefit from such a process, especially when politics are considered, or politicians are considered as actors that don't necessarily support citizens' views. And this gives a voice to citizens to come into the political process with their own ideas and their own suggestions. Now, I'll leave it here and we can discuss more of the details in our discussion.
That was great, Damir and Agnieszka and Urs too. Thank you so much, all 3 of you. Actually, I will ask Lucia to just bring you all back in, and Eva too. So we've heard 3 different cases now, and we've been to quite different types of situations. Now, Urs, you were explaining about a situation where there's quite strong opposition from what is actually nationally the ruling party, but a minority party, of course, in your context. And Agnieszka, you were talking about the notion of polarizing topics and people that might not very easily agree. And Damir, you had a very specific example around what happens in a situation where there's a lot of tension that isn't really about the topic of the assembly, but because of the fact that in Bosnia there's a very real history that is still present among the people there. And I can see already now there's been a few different comments as we went through this. For example, referring to the fact that in Northern Ireland there might be similar types of assemblies. Now, what I want to do is I want to just make sure that everyone has this mindset of what this might mean for the different types of contexts you're in, because my argument would be that there's something to learn from all of these situations for us as practitioners, even if we don't face these particular issues ourselves. So we're going to do a break quite soon, but I want to make sure that if anyone has a brilliant question, that you can pose it. And I noticed that Laurie had one question around what it means when you are thinking about the broader conversation around assemblies. So I think, Urs, I'd like to start with you, because obviously when you have a political opposition that may not agree with what you're doing or have an agenda around what you're doing, I'm assuming communication around the assembly and the broader dialogue with the broader community is much more difficult. So with that in mind, I'm actually wondering if you have any examples of attacks that happened in the around the assembly, or how it was how the conversation was happening around the assembly. Yeah, any comments or any thoughts around particular things you experienced?
Well, I think on local level, it was quite easy, because there is a local media group owned by the local government, so and run by the local government. So we could share every single and every important information, actually every detail of the whole process and of the assembly itself. So the inhabitants of the city knew everything about what is happening in and around the assembly. The tricky part was the a little bit higher level, or in the social media, because the social media is a totally different story. And with the political background of the local opposition, they had not only one, but a lot of tools to share their kind of I don't know, discredit of this event. And because of the financial background, and because of the differences of the financial background of a small local government and the governmental party, the spread of the information was a little bit interesting. So on nationwide level, I don't think that we had we created so many news, but when we created, it was controlled by the state party. And but on local level and in the social media, on social media sites, what which occur in local level, then it was just nice. And I think that the vast majority of the city agreed with us and really enjoyed the whole process and the event itself, and first of all the outcomes and the proposals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Urs. I want to ask the same question in a slightly different way to you, Agnieszka, and to you, Damir. I think Laurie's point around communication is a universal one for how we organize this. Like, we always want the conversation to be happening not just in the room of the assembly, but in the broader society as well. And I just wonder, with your specific examples and cases, how was that affected? And I mean, you, Damir, particularly, you highlight this as a very successful process, but I'm assuming that wasn't a given outcome. And the same for you, Agnieszka. Perhaps you can say a little bit about how you dealt with it as well, so we get a sense of why it did actually work for you.
Well, the transparency thing is very inviting the people who are not in the room to the process is always very important. We are streaming all the evidence, we are streaming all the city officials' presentations so that other citizens could also see and record that and put it in the social media so that they could check. And that's also the transparency part. But definitely I agree that it's about a broader cultural change, which doesn't happen overnight, as Éva said at the beginning. And what happens and what we can learn from these processes is that every time the people sit there and listen to the presentations, listen how the city works and how, and this whole experts educational part, they come to the conclusion that the information, the broader information, communication is the crucial thing. And there is always recommendation about it because they learn so much that they want other citizens to know that it's that they're living in the city for years, but sometimes they just learned where this money goes to, or how it happens that, you know, things are being decided in this way or that way. And it's a knowledge that they know it's not popular. And I think it is the first step to make it more, to do this cultural change, as you mentioned in the question, and to get it behind, I mean, to get it out of this room that we are sitting and discussing. And they themselves are becoming the advocates of this change. And they are talking about this at schools with their neighbors. And they share, when they come back, they share that they discussed it. And, you know, it's for them, it's important, and they want to share. So, yeah, I'd say that it's a very slow change, but, you know, we need to train this as a society. And that's one of the ways to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Agnieszka. And Damir, I'm curious for your experience.
So, I mean, citizens' assemblies happen over, let's say, a month, 2 months, 3 months. And to start a broad societal conversation during that short period is sometimes very difficult. So the idea is that it's necessary to look at them within a more broader context of what they achieve before, during, after, and not just during the time that when they're happening. So how some of this translated, one was already mentioned, transparency as much as possible. Every learning session, everything except the discussions among citizens in Mostar is actually still available, and citizens can sort of come back to this if they want to find out more about it, and they could during the process. So all of that was both live streamed and recorded. In the design process, there was sort of time left in between the sessions, and citizens were asked to reflect on what they have learned with their neighbors, with their family, with others, sort of to include views and ideas from outside in the room as well. In between weekends, they were sort of asked to talk about what they've learned. And then also in the design process, there was a feedback loop included with politics. Very draft recommendations, the first draft was sent to councillors to discuss before they came back to citizens to finalize the recommendations and vote on them, to include elected officials also as part of the broader conversation. This eased implementation, by the way. This eased the sort of adoption of this within the city council. And finally, several of the recommendations included elements of awareness raising, both about the topic and about citizens' assemblies as a tool to achieve these in schools, in the public, in public utility companies, which sort of are one of the ways to implement this, just to make them aware of where the recommendation came from, why it's important, and how you can work further with it. There's no one solution there. It's something that takes time and that you need to both include in the design, but then also need to follow up on.
All right, I'm gonna stop this round of questions for now, because we're gonna go to a short break, and when we come back from the break, we're gonna jump into some breakout rooms, and by the end of that, we'll be gathering this group of people again for some more reflection. So before the break, I just want to say, well, first of all, I hope everyone will be back and to join into these conversations. What we will be focusing on is really some of the elements of how this might impact the way we organize assemblies. So we'll be asking a few questions in these breakout rooms, but it'll also be a chance for you guys not only to share your own reflections, but to ask more in-depth questions to you guys too. But just as a reminder that you can think about in the break, Knoca spends a lot of time focusing on how to ensure that we set up a good governing structure around assemblies, how we set a remit that really is impactful and meaningful for a policy area, but which also can be thrown into a proper follow-up in the political system, so it actually has an impact on something in real life too. And we are obviously very concerned with designing good processes and safeguarding the experience of our participants, and for that matter, making sure that we have good, unbiased people giving evidence, and that they also feel like they are safe and not co-opted by someone. So some of these things are questions we in Knoca always ask ourselves around how to do good assemblies. And I think it'd be interesting to have some of these questions into a more intimate conversation in the different breakout rooms. So when we come back, that'll be an option for all of you guys. You'll be randomly thrown into a breakout room. And then we will have a chance for a more intimate conversation. So, right. So we're back from breakout room discussions. And I hope you had some meaningful discussions out there. I'd like to invite one person from each group to just come in and share a few thoughts about the main points of your conversation. And if you have any good advice to bring forward to the rest of us. So, Graham, I think if no one else from your group has been chosen, I'm thinking you are the one. And it'd be great to hear from you in this room too, Graham.
Gee, no, I was not expecting that. That is not... That's not fair. No, I mean, we were sorry, I haven't prepared anything. You've done that purposely.
Did that on purpose, yeah. So I'm so happy now. I've been waiting for this all. No,
I know. I think one of the things that was really that people were talking about in having some discussion about was this issue of trying to communicate assemblies in really polarized societies. And I thought that was a really challenging question about how you do that. And obviously this can be easier at a local level, but as soon as you scale up, this becomes much more difficult because of often government control of some of the channels of communication. And the other thing, and I managed to leave my group just at the last minute as we were in the middle of talking about this, we were talking about the possibility of running these things, running assemblies independently of government, in the way that the Shipyard Foundation run one in in Poland, and the way that Zip Institute are trying to run one in Skopje. But then that's problematic because almost all civil society organizations are seen as part of some political position. So it's really difficult to try and find that independent, that sort of trusted independent commissioner. But where that is possible, that may be a way of helping in that area. So those are the sorts of questions we're wrestling with. We thought there was no problem with running an independent and transparent and quality process. It's challenging with people who are from polarized societies, but there are ways and means of doing it. The question is, can you get perceived legitimacy? Are they perceived as legitimate, and are they perceived as independent by those people outside of them? So I think that's where we were. And I'm if there's anything else from my group, please do jump in.
Yeah, any additions from Éva or us or any of the participants?
Deborah also mentioned, I think, sorry, I forgot to mention this. Deborah also mentioned the way that there are these really interesting techniques we can use in sort of post-conflict societies, which are much deeper sort of trust building exercises between people. That was the other thing.
All right, thank you, Graham. And as always, you did a great job, even though I cheated a bit and hadn't prepared you for that. Let's jump to the group where I know Stine and Morten were helping Damir with the conversation, but I don't know which one of you will want to report back, but we'd love to hear what you talked about.
Yeah, well, I'll just say that we were group 3, but Anja Salsa, and she's already here, will present our points.
Yeah, well, I think I'm not that concise than Iris, and we probably also talked on a more general level than you did in your group, Graham. So one of the most important things is that both the topic and the place both are super context dependent, so it's not easy to have one single formula, but to the least to safeguard transparency in the whole process, all elements and design features need to be accessible, be that by online presentations of agendas, letters, the recruitment process, of course, etc. And then we had this long conversation on how to select experts and the role of experts and evidence. So on one hand, there was this stance of like how that experiencing things might be much better than presenting or reporting evidence, which is all this capacity building of citizens in the sense of political literacy. But then we also outlined different ways of how to select evidence, which could be random sampling, it could be a core team, it could be an extra body. Yes. Would you help me, Stina? Did I forget something?
I think you did very nice. And I think we talked about so many things. So it's a nice picked selection that you made.
All right, thank you, Anja, and thank you, Stina. Now, Agnieszka, I'll ask you as well if you have anything to add. But in our group, I think we were around some quite big dilemmas in a sense, because as Laurie said, these processes are about getting people engaged in the democratic systems. But funny enough, there are some things underlying these types of things that are, I suppose, up for debate. Because is that the main purpose of the assembly? Or what if the assembly, so we had these examples in our group from Germany where there's a lot of communication around the assemblies happening in Germany, and there's a lot of trust in the conversation because of the situation in Germany, but it may not always be the case. So we had these open questions that I don't think we concluded on necessarily, but that really are around in part the purpose of the assembly in terms of the mandates given to the assembly, but also around how to create this broader dialogue so that it's not just conversations happening in an assembly, but in the broader community. But Agnieszka, do you have anything to add to what I said?
Really? No, I think you just summarized it. But we were in the middle of the discussion. We haven't concluded yet. So I guess, yeah, more or less it was all about it.
Thanks, Agnieszka. I was going to bring you back, Agnieszka, and I'm also going to bring Damir and Urs and Éva back for a final recap. So we only have a few minutes left, really. Obviously, the questions we're asking here are huge. And I don't think there's any easy quick fixes that will ensure the processes will run smoothly. And one of the reflections that I've had throughout this is that a lot of the things that we talk about when it comes to good practice are in a way the same, that are relevant for a lot of these situations, but somehow the risk or the margin for error is smaller. So if you don't have a good governance structure to support you with making sure that there is legitimacy towards the process, if you don't have a good selection of citizens that ensures the proper diversity, and I think you could probably go through the list with all the different good advice we try to implement on practices, then the risk for an assembly is bigger. The stakes are somehow higher. We only have kind of a few minutes left. So I think the most meaningful thing is to just do a round of reflections from all of you guys in terms of some of the lessons that you draw. So you can focus either on the lessons you feel that you've drawn from the work that you've done with your own work. But I'd love to hear if any new thoughts or reflections have come up from us having had this conversation here today. So I have no particular desire to mandate the order. So feel free to jump in when you feel ready.
I could start it off. And I mean, one of the things that I've got from this is that we're not essentially talking just about difficult environments as a singular, but multiple ways that environments can be difficult in different ways. Be this by design of the topic, which might be conflictual as such, or be this by the sort of place where we're having it, or be this just by the politics around holding an assembly as such. And they require different solutions. And as you mentioned, across all of the elements of the process, it's not just that you can, let's do citizen selection right, like let's do the recruitment right, and we'll have a good process. No, you really need to include thoughts about both the legitimacy, representativeness, and the quality, transparency in every single step along the way, and thinking about it in different ways, like know your context and then try to adapt on how you best can achieve all that you want in every single step of the process design. And again, it's what you achieve, you have to communicate. So it's in the end also about communicating the outputs to the broader environment in a way that achieves some impact. Yeah, different types of difficult environments. That's my take.
Thanks, Damir. That was very concise and clear. I see your hand, Deborah, but let's continue the round first. And perhaps, Deborah, I can invite you to write your message in the chat. So, Éva, Urs, Agnieszka, feel free, any one of you who's ready.
I can shortly jump in. It's for me, it's very, even hearing your experiences today, it's on one side, it's about the legitimacy, about the process, about the decision making, but this getting out of the bubbles, and especially in this polarized society, when they can experience this kind of suing the society back again, and there is a safe space for expressing differences and expressing different opinions. And that's something together, that they can create something together, which even if it's not too ambitious, even if it's not very progressive, but it is a kind of compromise and seeing each other, hearing each other in it. I think that's smaller steps. We don't need to jump a very big step to this democracy ladder, but still it is kind of experiencing democracy in practice, and I think that's one of the biggest outcomes from such processes. Yeah, that's my reflection after this meeting. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Agnieszka. And Urs and Éva, I'm just going to point you to, for your reflection, to the question that Graham posed, in case you have anything to add. He's basically asking what Knoca might be able to do to support assemblies in highly conflictual or polarized contexts. And Urs, I'm curious actually to hear your reflections, particularly as a politician.
Yeah. As a political decision maker, I stated one statement a few times before, and Éva knows it exactly. So my opinion about the Citizens Assembly, and so I think that deliberation and the Citizens Assembly itself is a very useful tool for a political decision maker, because at the end of the process, so at the end of the day, you might be almost 100% sure that your decision will coincide with a well-founded will of the local residents. So you cannot fail, and this is the most comfortable situation you can imagine as a political decision maker. So I've become a real fan of Citizens Assembly, and I would suggest all the leaders, all the political leaders, to have the courage and to find a perfect venue for a similar event in every single town, in every single country, and in every possible situation.
All right, thank you, Urs. Éva, that gives you the last word.
Thank you so much. I fully agree with everything what my colleagues have just said. And what I would like to emphasize is essentially how knowledge exchange and sharing experiences and being able to honestly discuss processes, including failures, how important this is. And thank you very much, Mark and Graham and Knoca colleagues for organizing this webinar, because I think it was very, very useful for us. So I personally learned a lot from these discussions, and I hope to continue this. One other thing is that we all have to be very patient, because again, these are slow processes, and again, changing mindsets is a difficult task. So yeah, we will have to be patient, and there are no perfect processes just yet. We're getting there, but again, that takes time and practice. And yeah, I mean, our experiences have all shown that citizen assemblies are a fantastic way to shake people out of their political apathy and polarization. So we just have to keep on going. And thank you very much for being with us in this journey.
All right, and that pretty much brings us to a close. So thank you so much to all of you for joining, particularly, of course, to our speakers. it really is valuable to get reflections from people who have been experiencing different elements of what it means to do these assemblies. And I think the perspectives brought here today are not only informative if you're in a situation exactly like the one you're in. I think it really says something about how we do assemblies in general. So I think there is something to learn. And I think this notion of how to maintain legitimate processes is a question that we should always keep asking ourselves. So again, thank you to all of you. Thank you to everyone else who joined. The recording of this will be available in a few days. And if you can't wait, you can always go into our website and look at recordings of some of the other assemblies. So we did a learning call on the Polish Assembly, for example. So the specific National Assembly in Poland is a conversation you can go back and find, along with a whole bunch of other things. So looking to the future, however, we still have one workshop left before the end of the year. So there will be a learning call on the Irish Assembly on biodiversity. And that'll be on the 14th of December. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. And again, thank you all for joining, and see you next time.